Andy Dudak, short story writer and translator. I've had originals in Analog, Apex, Clark's World, Daily Science Fiction, FNSF, Interzone, 科幻世界, which is Science Fiction World, the biggest readership on the planet for a sci-fi magazine, and translations and a lot of others. That's me.
I am Victoria Sandbrook. I write spec fic. It leans much more towards fantasy than sci-fi, but I split the difference sometimes. I've had a handful of short stories published in the last few years. Shimmer, Podcastle, Cast of Wonders, Giganotosaurus recently. My novella was released there in January. I am a mom of two. You will hear them in the background, doubtless, because they are waking up or are already awake. And I don't know, I'm grateful to be here because if it weren't for virtual conventions, I would not be at conventions right now.
Cool.
Okay, we have another person. Hello. If you can just quickly change your name in the attendees stuff, please. So I'm just going to. I'm just going to run you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to run you all through the most important things, and that's number one, this session will end at 10 minutes till the hour, and I'm going to warn you 10 minutes before that, and if you need me to, also 5 minutes or 3 minutes or however many minutes you need. Would you like me to do that here in chat or just say it, or?
You can just say it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just pop up on audio to say it then. And at the end, an important thing, you don't leave yourself. I'm going to dismiss you.
Okay.
And with that, I'm muting myself. And you have fun.
Great, thank you. Sorry for the lateness, by the way. I was in the room from 11:50, but I was an attendee. I clicked the wrong link. So I was like, almost tapping at the glass, typing in the message board, like, hey, I'm trying to get in. So I do apologize. Oh, but you both have introduced yourselves already. Is that right? I came in to tell into that. Okay, fab. I think Jose is on his way, on the way too. But I guess we can kick things off since it's 12:07. So I just wanted to sort of ask you both. Victoria, you could go first. Obviously, you've had a lot of publishing experience, but can you think back to your very first short story that you submitted? How did you know it was ready? How did you know where to send it? Whatever you wanted to say.
So my first sold short story came out of Viable Paradise. I was saying when we were chatting before the panel officially started, I went into Viable Paradise as I can't write short novelist. And I came out with a short story that I assumed would never go anywhere. I had fun with it. I liked it, but I figured I'd just throw it at a bunch of walls and that it would never stick. And I submitted it to a couple places and in places that it would take a long time for me to hear back because I didn't want to worry about it. All pro pubs, this was my plan. And I didn't stay, so I didn't keep it as a churn. I didn't keep sending it out. But I went to Viable Paradise in October of 2014. My very first submission was by the end of November 2016. I don't remember the exact date. But November 2014, it was a month after Viable Paradise. I sold the story in 2016 to one of the first. Oh, hi. I sold that story to an anthology. I'd sent it to a couple magazines. I'd heard good things, which I was surprised about. I'd gotten at least personal. And you know, I hadn't written any other short stories in the meantime. I had just been enjoying sending it out, writing my novels in the background. So from there, when I realized that I could sell something, you know, and I'd written one, I figured, oh, I should try this. I should really actually work on some short stories. So my first sale was in 2016, and I've just been, you know, trying to work at it since then. You know, I've had a handful, and it's been kind of a wild ride and good ride. But you know, I really started in that, you know, I like it, maybe somebody else will, you know, moment. And I feel like there's that balance, you know, that you have that I've realized since then that there's a balance that I reach, of I love this and everyone else will ego, and it's good, you know, it's fine. It's got problems, but maybe someone, you know, like there's this balance between like ego and just complete doubt. And when I'm somewhere in that range, I send it out.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, Jose. We're just doing introductions, and I asked everyone if they could talk about their experience of their first story sale, or when they sent out their first story. So, Andy, did you want to go next?
First sale. I mean, first submission would have been a long time. I couldn't even remember. It was back when I was a teenager, and a lot of things have gone into the trunk. But I guess the first sale I really like to remember is maybe the first one to Clark's World, which was maybe 2013. And you know, I never know if things are ready to answer that question. I just, at a certain point, I get sick of it. I can't revise it anymore. I don't even, maybe barely like it anymore, and then I just throw it out there to see what happens. So that's my bad advice on that one. Sorry.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Jose?
So good morning, I'm Jose Riarte, and I've got stories in Strange Horizons, Lightspeed, Fireside Fiction, a whole bunch of other places. My first sale, so my first submission was all the way back in 1985 when I was 13, and I had many years of redemptions until 13. And I got a revise and resubmit on a story. I also, like Victoria, was somebody who was convinced by that point that I could not write anything short. It was rare if I could bring something in under 10,000 words. So it's funny to me now when I hear other people say, "Oh, I just could not possibly write short," because that was me, and it's a skill, so you learn it. So I got a revise and resubmit, and I love that text that they always. If you don't think this is a good idea, then that's fine. You know, feel free not to do it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I spent, you know, I reached out to everybody that I knew and said, hey, could you help me get this to where they want it to be? And I think I knocked over a chair at Starbucks in my excitement when I got the new it. I was so thrilled. And by the way, I'm just going to say up front, I'm having really bad connectivity issues right now at this moment. It seems to be stable, but just if I seem to cut in and out, that's what's going on.
Great, thank you. Just really quickly, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Phoenix Alexander. I'm the moderator. I'm the science fiction librarian at the University of Liverpool, and I'm a very baby writer. I have exactly 5 short stories sold in Beneath Sea Skies, Black Static, Metaphorosis, to name a few. And yeah, so people are wondering, who the heck is that person? That's me. Anyway, thank you for that answer. I guess the next question I had would be, you know, for people thinking about sending their stories out, how does one go about choosing the right venue, or do you write with a specific venue in mind, or do you sort of let the story come first? Andy, did you want to take that one first to start?
Sure. I guess you got to first of all read these markets. That's obviously figure out what the editor or editors like at that particular market, what type of, for instance, maybe Analog is, you know, a little more hard sci-fi, a little more old school, although they do all kinds of stuff too. But and Clark's World's more maybe how would you say this? Just a little more experimental, a little more literary sometimes. It's not even a good way to put it, but something like that. Yeah, and you read them and try to judge where your story might fit. I also always start at the top. The top, my favorite markets, and I just go down.
Mhm.
That's how I do it every time. So, yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Jose?
I was also brought up with the advice of start at the top, which I'm going to define as pro-paying markets, CIFLO recognized markets. And that's what I did. Of course, that resulted in a 28-year gap before my first sale. So I know people who have done otherwise, and it has worked for them. And what I've done right now, I'm pretty happy with where I am. When I talk to people about this, I always say, well, start with the magazines that you read. And sometimes that results in an awkward silence as people who have maybe come to a presentation or aspiring writers quietly admit that they don't actually read the short fiction markets that are out there. If you read enough of them, then you get to figure out which ones are your favorites. And I could definitely tell you that I love Strange Horizons vibe, and I love Uncanny Magazine, even though I've never sold there, and I love Fireside vibe. And then so you start to get a feel for who also is likely to love what you do in return. And then I don't know. I use the submission grinder to help me consider all my other options as well.
The submission grinder, for those who don't know, is a website that you post your stats to. So you record your submissions, and you can see how many days it's been out and the average response times. And there's all sorts of data that you can crunch, and it is great fun. How about you, Victoria?
I'd say I'm definitely a lot in line with what Andy and Jose have both said. I start at the top. I go through Grinder and see, what's moving and what's not. I try not to submit to markets where anymore. Every now and then, when I said at the beginning, I tried to submit to, markets that would take a long time because I didn't want to worry about it. And so I do put a little bit more effort into finding places that are, actually sending out responses. But, I sort of use that data. I've gotten really big into rejectomancy. And that keeps me sane and also makes me insane. It could be very toxic if you let it. I also do, I do think about what markets pay, and I try to give my stories the best shot at the most, this is a hated word, the most exposure, the most visibility, the most, honor they can achieve. And I try not to be the one that chooses that. I try to let the editors be the one that chooses that. The worst thing that can happen is that somebody says no. Because if I'm putting something out there that I think is reasonable, they're just saying no. They're not saying I'm a terrible person. Someone record that and send that to me next time I get a personal. But at the same time, I've landed a few long shots, and I've sent stuff out that's like doesn't look like anything they've ever published. This is not their style, but I love them and I'd love to be there. And who knows? And suddenly, there it is. It's like this doesn't quite qualify for for the anthology call. And it really depends on and this is a dangerous thing because sorry, there's a baby. It really depends on what's happening and what you're deciding to to stretch of the rules. If it's several thousand words, don't do it. If you're over several thousand words, no. If it's, well, if you interpret the theme this way, this works, why not? It might be a good fit. But it can be a really tough decision, and it does really still make me very nervous, even though I've landed a few of those. It makes me nervous to send stuff out, and maybe, you know, maybe the editor looks at it and goes, oh God, why is this here? But you know, I try to send the good stuff. So even if they don't think it's a good fit for them, maybe it's a good story. So that's what goes through my head on top of what I've read, where I like it, what they pay, that stuff. I'm gonna shut the office door again. Give me 1 second.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for that. I'm
I
looking
think
at
what
the.
Victoria said that was really.
Oh, sorry, Jose.
I was just going to tag on something. I thought it was really interesting how she said that she prioritized markets that held on to a story longer before responding, because before I had any sales.
When I was young.
So yeah,
No,
interesting choice.
because when I had any sales, I actually prioritized quick responses above pay rate, as long as they were pro, because I was in a hurry. So, you know, those really high markets that would take 2 months, they were going to see my stuff later than the people who respond in a day.
Yeah,
2
no.
months.
Sorry, Andy.
Sorry. Oh, I was just gonna maybe these days 2 months is even low. I mean, some of them take so much longer too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Just
No, sorry. Go ahead. There's a little lag here. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you a follow-up question based on that. Is this something you've seen that are there more fiction writers sort of submitting to the magazines these days, hence the longer response times? Obviously, I know we're in the pandemic is not helping things at the minute, but sort of taking that out of the equation, is there sort of growth or I don't want to use the word saturation because that's negative, but do you know what I mean? Is there just a high volume of short stories out there hitting these magazines?
I don't know if it's it probably is partly volume, but it also just you can go magazine by magazine. I mean, Clark's World tends to respond fast. Tends to. I don't. If I name some that take longer, am I? Should I not do that? Some of them do take longer. Some can take up to a year. I mean, and yeah, it all depends on how much you're into that market, how much time you're willing to invest. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's volume or not. I mean, I think more people than ever are probably writing and submitting. That's probably true.
I haven't noticed like field-wide trends. That doesn't mean they're not there, though. I've been paying attention for it.
Yeah, that was actually one of my sort of questions I sent you. Have you sort of, obviously you're all very experienced writers. Have you seen what kinds of changes have you seen or experienced? So, you know, as writers and readers of the short form in the field, obviously trying to give us a picture of the submission landscape, and that's open to anyone who wants to jump in.
I have since my 1-year-old was born, I haven't really kept any submissions super active, and I have not been submitting actively in the last few months. It's just been too crazy, and I haven't had anything that's been sort of shouting to get out there. But you know, since 2016, when I started submitting, you know, with some seriousness, it has been a real lesson for me how quickly some publications pop up and leave, and you know, and how some publications, you know, you think are deeply established, and you know, things happen. It's a great reminder how, you know, these magazines are run by people who are going through all the life stuff that we writers are going through. You know, health problems, deaths in the family, you know, job changes. Like a lot of these editors have full-time jobs besides their, you know, probably full-time jobs of running these magazines that we love so much. And, you know, so it's been really interesting to see like where my list of, you know, I'll come up with a list of where I want to send a story. And, you know, in the last couple of years, you know, even with the time it takes for several of the markets to respond, and, you know, it gets me, you know, it takes me several months to start working my way down the list with some, you know, with some rhythm. You know, it's not just submission windows that make me change the plan. you know, what opens and what closes. It's, you know, what magazines are gone, what magazines have popped up, what anthologies have come up, what anthologies didn't fund. You know, there's a lot of shifting to the landscape that I didn't sort of see as a reader before I started submitting. And I don't think that that's necessarily a new trend, but it's definitely something that I've learned to sort of anticipate. And with, you know, with a worldwide crisis like this, you know, I can only imagine that everything is, you know, there are just more hills. You know, I mean, this is just, everyone has hit the hilly section right now. Nobody is just going easy. So, you know, I don't think I've got enough distance from it to know what's happening now. But that's sort of been my observation in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, as far as the change of the landscape, yeah, like she said, they come and go, but the good news is recently Apex is coming back. A big deal in the field, and I think they're coming back next year. A great magazine, and yeah, so there's that.
Yeah,
as far as a recent change.
That's always a great thing too, to see that they, you know, that things that pause actually restart. You know, and it's not just I'll you know, I'll open this back up someday, and no one ever hears from people again. You know, like, it does actually happen, and that's encouraging.
Indeed.
Great. Just to turn to the Discord is popping off. People are really excited about what you all are saying. One comment mentioned that it's great to have at least two of you up there saying that, you know, you didn't think you could write short stories at first. It's really encouraging. But we also have a couple of questions that have arisen. The first question, someone is writing prequel stories for the novel they're querying. Is it a problem to sell those in terms of keeping the intellectual property of that world together? I wondered if any of you had anything to say about that sort of relationship between, you know, short form and novel querying, sort of tying into one world.
I'm not a lawyer, and I have not done this as a novelist yet. But if you are, I would say, if you have not sold it and you are querying it, it probably is fine. If you have a good agent, they are going to make sure that your publisher does not have, I mean, hopefully does not have rights to, you know, the like, to only publish all the things in that world. I've heard of contracts stipulating that anything any related work has to go through the publisher first, or has to be published by the publisher, and then people who want to sell short stories and their publisher doesn't want to publish short stories or doesn't publish short stories, you know, they can't write in that world. I don't think it's a problem from a querying standpoint. Is because there's no contract right now, but, you know, down the road, could there be, if you were, you know, going with an independent publisher who did both and, you know, wanted those rights, and you wanted to give them those rights, by then you probably have your you know, story back out of exclusivity. You know, that period when, you know, most publications ask you to not resell the work. I wouldn't imagine that a publisher would mind, book publisher, novel publisher would mind you having already, you know, used those exclusive first printing rights. So long as you're not giving plot away, you know, I don't think there's necessarily an issue with it. I would just sort of look at those potential roadblocks and navigate them as best you can.
I think it might even help. I mean, especially if you're still querying the novel, and you sell a prequel short story. It could be something to put in the query, right? But I don't know. I've never run into this problem, but that's my guess. Oh, Jose.
My internet's cutting out, but I've definitely seen other folks. You can't hear me?
Now I can.
Laggy.
Yeah, a bit laggy.
Okay. I'm having I'll drop out if it becomes unmanageable. But I've definitely, for instance, Adam Troy Castro has his Andrea Court. He's got both novels and shorts.
Oops, I think we might have lost you there, Jose. You've frozen a bit, but
Maybe he could
Yeah,
link
that's
back
in
in.
different markets.
thank you. Thank you. So another question, because I just want to try and we've got some really great questions coming up. Somebody asked, after your first sale, have you found subsequent sales easier? And is that a result of your added knowledge or editors taking more notice because you've been published previously? I guess you might count this as leveling up after your first.
I don't
Yeah.
think any of my sales have helped other sales. I think the leveling up is the work of writing. It's more the leveling up comes more in the work you do with your crit group and your readers, the work you do when there's nobody else around and you are, you know, bleeding tears
Yeah.
and crying blood and all that. You know, it's I don't think you know, and I think the other thing is, you know, leveling up in the sense that you know, you can internalize the rejections in a different way, especially personals, like knowing when you want to take personal feedback given in a personal rejection, when you don't. You know, knowing when you know, when it's just not right for the market and when it, you know, there's something that you could have done better. But I don't think that, and I do think that, you know, that advice has improved my stories when I've taken it, when I've chosen to take it. And I think it has improved my stories when I've chosen not to take it. I would like to think. And I have sold, I mean, I sold my novella having, you know, gotten 5 very in-depth personals that all said, you need to change this. And I was like, no. And I sold it, you know. So I think that's a big level up as far as like getting into the grind and getting the rejections and hearing things back. But I don't think any editor is, you know, looks at the cover letter and says, ooh, 5 sales, you know, ooh, 25 sales, you know. Like, you know, and especially with so many good markets that take stories blind, you know, I think that the most of the work that's happening is on my end with leveling up, or at least that's what I try to keep thinking about.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't know any editor that would accept something based on previous sales if it's not up to snuff. So if anything, I guess you make a sale, you get more confident, you write more, you submit more. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jose there? He looks
Yeah.
frozen. Oh, okay. Moving a little.
Jose, did you have anything to add about that? You know, what happens after that first sale? You know, do you build a relationship with editors? You know, does your writing level up? Oh, it might have frozen.
And then certainly, you know, the frequency with which they come has increased. And I'm cutting it out. I know. I'm sorry. Math person in me can't help but notice that and also question how many different variables there are. So I think Victoria's answer was really comprehensive. Who can really say though if you get a longer? I think it's fair to think you might get a longer look in this, or you might get some opportunities that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But certainly you often, oh, this is how you do the thing.
I think we got the gist of what you were saying, Jose, and I think it ties in, I guess, with the exposure. I mean, that I know you didn't like the word, but that was used earlier. You know, if your work's out there and you can start to build, I guess, a body of work that people can see, and it makes you more confident. Like you were saying. Oh, I think we've lost Jose, sadly.
Maybe he's trying to come back.
Before I come back, okay, perfect. Another question from the Discord. Somebody asks, when do you decide to trunk the story? Hi, Jose again. The question was, a question from the Discord was, how do you decide when to trunk a story?
I trunk with extreme prejudice. I trunk all the time. Even one rejection is enough to fill my insecurity-laden brain with doubt, and I'll just trunk it. But then I might come back a year or two later and look at it again. But yeah, I'm really sensitive that way. So again, not good advice, but that's my honest answer.
No, we appreciate it.
I try to give it the longest run possible, even if I've lost some faith in it. The exception is when I think, you know, upon rereading it, I do think I could do better, which, you know, might happen after the first, run, might happen after the 15th.
Hello.
I have also decided, you know, I've also looked at things and said, you know, I've written this for this particular market, you know, for an anthology that, you know, I didn't get into, and either I feel like, you know, I either feel like I don't see it fitting well elsewhere, and I'm making that decision, like contrary to my own advice a few minutes ago, where it's like, let the editor decide. You know, I do sometimes look at things and say, I don't see this, you know, landing very well. It doesn't match anybody's length needs. It's, you know, it's some weird narrative thing. I don't know. But it kind of is this weird soft spot for me that is very flexible story to story. I try not to trunk things right after a rejection. I try to send it back out at least once. And then while it's on submission, I usually decide, okay, if it comes back this time, I'm going to trunk it. Like I try to trunk it without having immediately had the negative response, because a few times that's happened and it's really like gotten me like stopped. I just lose my momentum. So I also kind of have this idea in my head that someday I'm going and like, now I'm ruining the surprise now, but someday I'm going to put a short story collection out saying, you know, entitled "You Didn't Buy This."
It's a good idea.
I love it, and you didn't buy it, and here it is. You know, you know, with complete respect to the editors who never bought it. You know, but you know, for those stories that I have a lot of faith in that just aren't hitting. You know, and I don't want. I haven't leveled up enough to change. I don't want to change, that sort of thing. You know, and the other thing is that trunks aren't permanent, and so it helps me step aside, you know, a little bit. You can always bring something out of the trunk if you've got the skills to work on it again. So, you know, I sort of don't really think of the trunk as sort of a permanent, like, dead space for my work.
Right. Jose, how do you know, or when do you trunk a story? If you can hear me.
Second, I can. I am actually really probably a third of all my stories don't actually even see their first submission, so I know that's kind of unusual. And I think like I think Andy was saying, if I don't feel enthusiastic for it, if I don't feel that it's going to, if I feel like it's significantly lower in quality than the other published work that I have, then I worry that having this story come out is, you know, is not going to do good for me. So I'm actually pretty quick to trunk, and that's probably just kind of my issues.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Thank you, everyone. All right, next question from the Discord again. Do you have a regular schedule or method of submitting to certain markets? And do any of you keep spreadsheets or anything like this? Do you sort of track your, you know, where to submit, when to submit, etc.? You want to jump in?
Yeah, well, while the baby is not actively in the office, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
It'll be about two more seconds. She'll be back.
Don't worry.
I do have a spreadsheet. I sort of track where I've submitted before and where like the like highest response I've gotten back from them.
Mhm.
I also track, I track what's out and where I intend to send it next. And I definitely use Submission Grinder to sort of monitor what's out, how long it's been out, what other things, are moving through that market. But as far as I can't. There was another part to the question I can't remember, so I'm gonna just pass it on. Yes,
Right.
spreadsheets. All the spreadsheets. They are my addiction.
Thank
I think
you.
they were asking if you had.
Yeah, schedule, regular schedule. Just when it's ready.
I don't know about a schedule, but I do keep the spreadsheets. I think you have to keep track of your submissions in some way. I'm very minimal about it, but I do keep track. I don't use the grinder, but I should, because that's a good way to participate in the community too. So I guess I should do that, and it's valuable in a lot of ways, as mentioned before. But again, I don't like to dwell. This is just me personally and my issues. I don't like to dwell on the rejections too much, so I don't have like a running count of those. I never saved them in the old days when I used to submit by mail, snail mail. But yeah, these days I have my spreadsheets for sure.
Sorry for interrupting. This is your 10-minute warning.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just use- What? I didn't hear whatever the last thing was. I just use a submission grinder. I used to use a spreadsheet. These days, I guess I don't have the energy to store the data in more than one place. As far as like writing routine, this year in 2020, I've been a lot better about that. I don't have like the same time of day. I'm a little better about making time for it. I use Christy Yant's tools for writers spreadsheet to help track productivity. I had to kind of tweak what I count as productivity so that it wouldn't be defeating for me. So for instance, if I'm revising and not writing, I still count that as productivity. And I've been able to keep that pretty well. It's if you Google her for Christy Yant tools for writers, it's a Google Docs spreadsheet and it's terrific. Well, it's working for me right now.
That's what I use.
Listen, thank you. All right, moving us on to another question. Someone in the Discord asked, is it worth submitting to non-paying markets?
I almost never have. I've made one exception because it was a Harvard Literary Journal and I knew the editor.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'll pretty much only submit reprints.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Reprinting stories previously published, but it's usually up to 6 months after, depending on what the contract says. You can submit it as a reprint to other venues. Just for folks who might not know.
And even then, only if I've got some sort of a personal connection or reason to want to see it there, or they add value maybe in some other way, like a translation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Been involved in a couple things where you wouldn't necessarily get paid up front, but you might share the profits if it works out. So I did do that a couple times. Is it worth it? That's a tricky question. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. Maybe if the story just none of the editors bit, the ones that pay, and you still want to see it out there somehow, you could always try to self-publish it too. But so maybe it could be worth it. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm being helpful at all. Okay. Somebody else talk.
I kind of agree with both of you. I have sent reprints to non-paying markets. I've never sent something unpublished that and or at least not since college and my college literary journal, and I wasn't thinking about things as paying markets and non-paying markets back then. And that's actually the only place I've submitted reprints, is sending, because they publish alums, and I'm like, hey, if you'd like this. And I think that's that's sort of my feeling. And if it's something that I love, if it's something that I like, I love the idea of the value add. like where, not just for me, but for, for the industry, for, like, someone else is gaining something important, and not just they're gaining my writing, like that's also not, that's not what I'm putting into it, so it's not something I do as a practice. And I feel like by the time I've run out of paying markets, pro paying and semi-pro, if I haven't sold the story, I'm usually starting to feel like either it won't sell, I need to trunk it, that sort of thing. I'm not, I don't get to the non-paying markets and still sort of have the juice left to keep it out there.
There's something that I think is difficult to see except in hindsight, and that is there are stories of mine that didn't sell that I'm kind of glad now didn't make it out into the world, because they don't represent what I now know, and they don't represent who I am now. And so there's a line that I don't know how much I have the discernment to judge of. Nobody's buying this, but it really belongs out there in the world. They're just haven't found the right people for it, or nobody's buying this because it really isn't up to my standards. And if I had more confidence in my ability to make that judgment, I might feel differently. But for now, if I can't find a home for something, then that might not be a bad thing. Or that might not be the worst ending to that story. I'll write a story.
That's a great point.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, awesome. Okay, I'm going to try and whiz through as many of the Discord questions. People are so interested in getting so much from this. Somebody asks, how do you find people to read or even help a short story before submitting? How do you find those beta readers? That community. If you're just starting out and are serious about trying to publish your work.
Codex is a great
There are lots of
resource.
online. Yeah, I'm wearing my Codex T-shirt.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. I need to catch up with that. I haven't been on there in a while, but the way it works is you gain credits for critiquing others, and then it keeps a tally, and you can get critiques, and that's helped me sell a few stories. I'm pretty sure in the early days. Yeah. I think you need one pro set. What's the requirement to get in?
One pro sale. Something in one of the best of anthologies.
Okay.
An MFA, or you have to have gone through one of the workshops, which is how I got in. I got in after I went to Bible Paradise, and I sold, and I wasn't really active.
By literary.
What was that one? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Or if you're represented by a literary agency.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify for folks listening, Codex is a website and forum, so that's how it works.
Yeah.
Before
I have an in-person critique.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And I've got an in-person critique group, and I would say if you go to your library, most libraries that I've seen have some sort of larger kind of amorphous writing group, and I'm not saying that becomes your critique group necessarily, but that's where you can find like-minded people, or any other place where you go to, like conventions, if you're able to travel to things like that. But the people in my in-person critique group are people from my community that I largely met through larger writing groups, and then we spun off and did our own thing. So I don't, not everybody you meet is really going to be valuable, but you can find the people who are serious and find the people who are trying to get better and the people who are going to help you build each other up.
Yeah, I really leveled up when I found my local writing group, and I did a lot of sort of casual dating with writing groups around here, and I found some people that I did not mesh with, and I was so very glad to ghost them afterwards. Like I was like, I don't exist. I'm sorry.
I like the way
and I think it takes a lot to when you're starting out, when you're looking for that community, to be able to walk away from a group that doesn't fit you. It's more valuable to have the people that do than to stick with the people that don't. And I'm not just talking about people who give you the yay feedback and love your work. Like, they have to be able to appreciate your work enough to tell you what's wrong with it. and they have to be, and as a group, we've leveled up together, and it's been really important to watch them sell things after I've critiqued, to watch me sell things after they've critiqued. It's a really rewarding process. And I think it can happen online. I don't think it has to happen in person. It depends on everyone's style. So, if you haven't found your people, keep looking. It took me years. And I wouldn't have gotten to Viable Paradise without them. And I wouldn't have gone through, a rewarding, though unsuccessful query, novel querying agent search. And I don't think I would have sold any of these stories that I've sold without the people that I've gathered between Codex and my local writing group and Viable Paradise and sort of all those connections I've made. So, yeah, this is a great place to go to the con suite and say, hey, who wants to read a story? Maybe someone will say yes. What's the worst thing that could happen? Somebody says yes. So, be brave, date around, find your people.
Yeah, that's a great analogy to dating. I agree with that. I've been in a few groups myself. Some worked out, some didn't. I was in a group with Ania who launched this whole con, and that was a cool group. It was really constructive. So.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have time for one last question, Administrator?
Not really. I'm sorry. I will have to go facilitate another stream, so I can't stay here with you. But this room will be closed for the next 2 hours. So if you want to keep hanging out in the Discord channel, you're welcome to do that and answer questions there.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
But I'm going to have to dismiss you from here now.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Andy, Victoria.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Great seeing you all.